The first thing they did was laugh. Not all of them, not at first. It started with the man in the front row, the one with the gold watch and the open collar, the one who had already spent $40,000 on a woman with red hair and a terrified smile. He looked at the platform, he looked at what was standing on it, and he laughed. Short, sharp. The kind of laugh you aim at something you find beneath you. Then the man beside him laughed. Then the woman in the second row, the one draped in silk who had been taking notes in a leather portfolio like she was shopping for furniture. She did not laugh out loud. She smiled. The smile was worse. And then the room joined in. Not roaring, not howling. This was not that kind of crowd. These were men with 8-figure portfolios and women with last names that opened doors in 4 countries. They did not howl. They murmured. They chuckled behind their hands. They exchanged glances that said the same thing without saying it at all. Look at that. Look what they dragged up here. Who threw that one away? She stood on the platform barefoot. Gray cotton dress, 2 sizes too large, hanging off her shoulders like a surrender flag. Zip-tie bruises circled both wrists, purple turning yellow at the edges, like bracelets made of something no one should ever have to wear. Her hair was cut close to her head, natural coils tight against her scalp, and her skin was deep brown and dry and ashen under the warehouse lights, like she had not been touched by lotion or sunlight or kindness in longer than anyone in this room could imagine. She was 24 years old. She weighed 118 pounds. There was a thin scar running through her left eyebrow from a fall she took when she was 11, and no one took her to get stitches. She had not eaten in 2 days. She did not know what city she was in. She did not know what day it was. She knew 3 things. Her name, which no one here had asked. Her mother's face, which she had been carrying in her memory for 15 years, like a photograph she could not put down. And the fact that the men in this room had not brought her here to help her. The auctioneer cleared his throat. He was a thin man with a thin voice, and the particular discomfort of someone who understood exactly what he was doing, and had decided the money was worth the understanding. "Final lot of the evening," he said. "Female, 24. No documented medical history. No identification. Sold as is, no returns, no warranties expressed or implied." He paused, adjusted his glasses. "Starting bid is 10,000. Nothing." The silence that followed had texture. It pressed against the walls of the converted warehouse in Queens, pushed against the industrial lights, settled over the metal folding chairs and the velvet ropes and the champagne glasses, like a layer of something cold and final. It was the silence of a room full of people looking at a human being and deciding she was not worth the breath it would take to bid. 5,000, the auctioneer tried. The man in the front row leaned to the woman beside him. "Damaged goods," he said. He said it loud enough for the platform, loud enough for her. "That one has mileage on it." The woman laughed. The sound was polished and bright and completely empty of anything human. Before we go deeper, I have to give a special shout out to someone who has been here since day 1. Ms. Teresa B. Riggins, watching from Cypress, Texas. Teresa, you show up every single time, and this community wouldn't be the same without you. We see you, we appreciate you, and this story tonight, it's for you. Now, if you're new here and you want your city and your name called out in the next story, it's simple. Subscribe, hit that bell, and drop your name and location in the comments. I read every single one. Now let's get back into this, because what happens next? Nobody in that room saw it coming. 2,000, the auctioneer said. His voice had thinned to almost nothing. "Ladies and gentlemen, for charity, $2,000. Surely someone will." A man in the third row stood up. He was drunk. You could see it in the way he swayed, the way his grin hung crooked on his face, like a painting someone had bumped and never straightened. He pointed at the platform, pointed at her.
"I will give you $500, he said, "and the room can watch me get my money's worth right here."
The laughter that followed was the loudest sound of the evening. It bounced off the concrete walls and the steel rafters and hit her from every direction at once, and she absorbed it the way concrete absorbs rain, without expression, without reaction, without giving them a single thing. She stood on that platform in a dress that did not belong to her, with bruises on her wrists and nothing on her feet. And she did not flinch. She did not look down. She did not fold her arms or hunch her shoulders or do any of the things a person does when they are trying to become smaller. She stood with her spine straight and her chin level and her hands loose at her sides, and she looked at the back wall of the warehouse as if every person in the room had already ceased to exist. And she had. She had stopped seeing them. She had learned this trick a long time ago, in a house where no one spoke to her, in a life where no one looked at her, in 24 years of being treated like a piece of furniture that someone forgot to throw away. She had learned how to leave a room without moving, how to be present and absent at the same time, how to stand in the center of cruelty and go somewhere else entirely. She went somewhere else now. She went to a kitchen she barely remembered, a woman singing, hands braiding her hair, the smell of cocoa butter and something cooking on the stove. Mama. The word lived in her chest like a fist. She was there, in that kitchen, in that memory, when the voice came from the back of the room. $2 million. The laughter stopped. It did not taper off. It did not trail away. It stopped the way a heartbeat stops. All at once, completely, with a silence that felt like falling. The drunk man sat down so fast his chair scraped the concrete. The woman with the portfolio closed it. The auctioneer opened his mouth, and nothing came out. Every head in the room turned toward the back wall, toward the voice, toward the man who had just bid $2 million on a woman the room would not spend $500 on. He was standing just inside the loading dock entrance. Black suit, no tie, top button undone. He was tall, 6'1", lean in the way that blades are lean, as if everything unnecessary had been stripped away, and what remained was only what cut. His hair was black and pushed back from his face, and his face was the kind of face that did not ask for attention, but took it anyway. Sharp jaw, dark eyes set deep beneath straight brows. A stillness about him that was not calm. Calm is passive. This was the stillness of something coiled. Kang So-jun, 36 years old, head of the Kang Syndicate, the most powerful Korean crime organization on the eastern seaboard. He walked forward. The crowd did not part for him. They shrank. There is a difference. Parting is a courtesy. Shrinking is survival. $2 million, he said again. Same volume, same tone. The voice of a man who had never needed to repeat himself, and found the exercise faintly insulting. For the woman on the platform, the auctioneer found his voice somewhere in the vicinity of his shoes.
Sir, 2 million. That is, she is... The starting bid was... Is there a counter?
No one moved. The front row man with the gold watch was staring at his hands. The drunk was studying the floor.
Then she is mine.
He stopped 10 feet from the platform. His dark eyes found her. Found the bare feet. The bruised wrists.
the gray dress hanging wrong, the straight spine and the level chin, and the face that was looking at the back wall because she had already decided that everyone in this room was invisible. His jaw tightened. Something shifted behind his expression. Fast, deep, like a crack running through stone. And then it was gone. His face was still again, but his hands, hanging loose at his sides, had closed into fists. He opened them. Slowly. Deliberately.
The way a man opens his hands when the alternative is breaking something. "Take her down from there," he said. His voice dropped half a register. "Now." The auctioneer moved faster than he had moved all night. 2 assistants appeared. They reached for her arms. She pulled back, not violently, precisely. The controlled withdrawal of someone who has had too many hands on her without permission. So June saw it. He saw the way she pulled her wrists against her body. He saw the bruises. He saw the flinch she turned into a step. "Do not touch her," he said to the assistants. The words were quiet and spaced and absolutely clear. The way a man speaks when he means every syllable as a separate warning. "She walks on her own, or you answer to me." The assistants stepped back so fast they nearly fell off the platform. She looked at him then. For the first time. Not at the back wall, not at the middle distance, not at the place she went when the world became unbearable. At him. Brown eyes met dark ones. Hers were dry. Steady. Exhausted and alert at the same time, the way only people who have survived long stretches of danger can be. She looked at him and she did not see rescue. She did not see hope. She saw a man who had just spent $2 million, and in her experience, men who spent money on women always wanted something back. She stepped off the platform on her own. Her bare feet hit the concrete floor and the cold shot up through her legs, and she did not react. She walked toward him because there was nowhere else to walk, and she stopped 3 feet away, close enough to see the thin white scar along his collarbone, where his shirt collar shifted, close enough to smell cedar and black coffee and something clean and sharp. And she said the first word she had spoken in 4 days. "You wasted your money." His expression did not change. "I never waste anything," he said. The car was a black Escalade with tinted windows and leather seats that were warm when she sat down. She did not know that cars could have warm seats. She sat in the back and placed her hands flat on her thighs and felt the heat radiating up through the leather into her legs, and she had to press her teeth together to stop her jaw from trembling, because it was the first warmth she had felt from anything in longer than she could measure. She did not ask where they were going. She did not ask his name. She did not ask what he wanted, because she already knew what men who bought women wanted, and asking would not change the answer. And she had learned a long time ago that questions were a luxury for people who had choices. The man who had bought her sat in the passenger seat. He had not gotten in the back with her. She noticed that. She filed it in the part of her brain that catalogued details, because details were the only weapons she had ever owned. He sat in front. He did not turn around. He did not watch her in the mirror. He made a phone call in Korean, his voice low and rapid, and she could not understand the words, but she understood the tone. Clipped, controlled, precise. The tone of a man giving orders to people who did not have the option of refusing. The driver was Korean too, younger, mid-30s. He had an easy face, the kind that smiled without effort. And when he adjusted the rear-view mirror, his eyes found hers for a second, and he gave her a small nod. Not pity, not appraisal, just acknowledgement. She existed. He had noticed. His name was Danny Cho, but she did not know that yet. She would learn it tomorrow. She would learn that he was So Jun's right hand, practically his brother, that they had grown up together in Flushing, that Danny handled logistics for the King Syndicate with the easy competence of someone who had been doing it since he was 17. She would learn that he made people laugh, that he cooked terrible ramen and claimed it was a family recipe, that he called everyone little sister or big brother, depending on their age, and meant it with a warmth that felt like sunlight after a long winter. She would learn all of this, and later, much later, she would wish she had not. But that was later. Tonight, she sat in the back of a warm car driving through Queens at 11 p.m. and watched the city slide past the tinted windows, and thought about the last time she had been in a car. Curtis Webb's sedan, brown, smelling of cigarettes and something sour. He had driven her to the warehouse in silence, pulled up to a loading dock, walked her to a metal door, handed her to two men she had never seen, and turned around and walked back to the car without looking at her. 15 years. 15 years she had lived in his house in Baton Rouge. 15 years of being fed and sheltered and absolutely, completely, systematically ignored. He did not beat her. He did not yell at her. He did not do anything to her at all. And that was the worst part. Because at least violence is acknowledgement. At least cruelty requires someone to see you. Curtis Webb had raised her the way a man raises a plant he did not want, but feels obligated to water. Minimum light, minimum attention. Keep it alive. Do not let it grow. She had grown anyway. She had grown in the spaces he did not watch, in the hours between his indifference, in the library 4 miles from the house where she walked every Saturday because Curtis did not own books and did not care if she left as long as she came back before dark. She taught herself to read, beyond the 6th grade level the schools had abandoned her at. She read novels, histories, science, psychology. She read a book about birds once and spent 3 months learning to identify every species in the parish by its song. She could tell you the difference between a Carolina wren and a winter wren by a single note from 50 yards. She could tell you what a mockingbird was imitating and why. She could tell you that the brown thrasher sang everything twice, every phrase repeated, as if it wanted to make sure someone was listening. No one was listening. She sang the bird songs to herself, softly, in the bedroom Curtis had given her, the one at the back of the house, with the window that did not lock, and the mattress that sagged in the middle, and the walls that were the same color they had been the day she arrived at 9 years old. The room had never been painted. No picture had ever been hung. No curtain had ever been chosen. It was the room of someone temporary, and she had been temporary in it for 15 years. The car stopped. She looked up. Manhattan. She knew it was Manhattan because she had seen it in books, the skyline like a jaw full of bright teeth, but she had never been here. She had never been anywhere. Baton Rouge, to the warehouse. The warehouse to the auction. The auction to this car. Those were the only trips her life had contained. They pulled into an underground garage beneath a glass tower on the west side. Sojun got out, Danny got out. The back door opened, not by either of them, but by a third man who appeared from somewhere in the garage, older, gray-haired, who looked at her with professionally empty eyes and held the door without speaking. She got out. The concrete was cold under her bare feet. She walked across the garage floor and into an elevator paneled in dark wood and brushed steel, and the elevator rose without sound, and the numbers on the panel climbed past 10, 20, 30, until they reached a number she had never stood at before. The doors opened into a hallway that opened into a room that was bigger than Curtis Webb's entire house. Floor-to-ceiling windows, the city thrown out below like a circuit board on fire. Black furniture, clean lines, the kind of space designed by someone who believed that emptiness was its own form of luxury. A kitchen with a marble island, a living room with a view that went on until the horizon swallowed it. She stood in the doorway and looked at it. "Which room is mine?" she said. "And when do you want me to leave?" She said it flat, not hostile, not defeated. The practical tone of a woman who had learned that every shelter was temporary and every kindness had a price, and the only way to survive was to know the cost up front. Sojun had been removing his jacket. He stopped. He held the jacket in one hand and looked at her, and something crossed his face that she could not read. Fast and complicated, like weather moving behind glass. "You are not a prisoner," he said. His voice was careful. "You are not property. I did not buy you." She almost laughed. The sound got as far as her throat and died there. "You spent $2 million. I spent $2 million to remove you from a room full of men who would have spent 500. There is a difference." She looked at him. He looked at her. The city burned silently behind both of them. "There is a room," he said. "Third door on the left. It has a bed. It has a bathroom. The bathroom has a lock." He paused. "On the inside." He said it deliberately. He said it as if the detail mattered, as if he understood that a lock on the inside of a bathroom door was not a small thing, was not a detail, was, in fact, the difference between a room and a cage. And he wanted her to know that he knew the difference. She walked past him. She walked down the hallway. She found the third door on the left. She opened it. A bed with white sheets and a gray blanket folded at the foot. A window overlooking the river. A bathroom with white tile and a glass door and a lock. A lock that was small and silver, and turned with a click that sounded like the most expensive thing she had ever heard. She locked the door. She sat on the bathroom floor with her back against the wall and her knees drawn up and her hands pressed against her mouth, and she breathed. Not cried. She had not cried since she was 9 years old, when she had stood in the doorway of Curtis Webb's house with a garbage bag containing everything she owned, and realized that the woman who was supposed to come back for her was not coming back. She had stopped crying that day the way a faucet stops when the water is shut off. Completely. Mechanically. Because crying required someone to hear it, and no one had been listening for 15 years. She sat on the bathroom floor of a penthouse in Manhattan, behind a door that locked from the inside, and she pressed her hands against her mouth, and breathed, and breathed, and breathed. In the living room, Sojun stood at the window with his hands in his pockets, and looked at the city, and did not move for a very long time. Danny appeared beside him with 2 glasses of soju. He held one out. Sojun did not take it. "What are you going to do with her?" Danny asked. "Find out who put her on that platform. Find out why. And then make them regret it with a thoroughness they will spend the rest of their lives trying to forget." Danny looked at him. He had known Sojun for 22 years. He had seen him make decisions that rearranged the power structure of entire neighborhoods. He had seen him end men's livelihoods with a phone call and a sentence. He had never heard his voice sound like this. Low, tight, vibrating with something that Danny, who knew him better than anyone alive, could only describe as personal. "And what if it is not that simple?" Danny asked. Sojun finally turned from the window. His dark eyes were flat and bright at the same time, the way metal looks when it has been heated past the point of glowing. "Then I will make it simple," he said. She moved through his penthouse like she was made of smoke. That was the only way to describe it. She occupied space without claiming it. She walked on the balls of her feet, silent on the hardwood floors, appearing in doorways and disappearing from them so smoothly that Sojun found himself checking rooms twice because he was never certain if she had been there or if he had imagined it. She was a ghost in a gray dress, drifting through a home that belonged to someone else, touching nothing, disturbing nothing, leaving no evidence that she existed. She ate when no one was watching. He knew this because the food disappeared, but he never saw her eat. He would leave the kitchen at night and find in the morning that an apple was gone, that 3 slices of bread had been taken from the bag, that the leftover rice from Danny's terrible ramyun had been eaten straight from the container. She ate standing up, he suspected. She ate quickly. She ate the way animals eat when they are not sure the food will still be there in 5 minutes. She read his books. He knew this because he was a man who kept his library in a specific order. A system so precise that his housekeeper had once moved a single volume 2 inches to the left while dusting, and he had noticed within the hour. She was careful. She was meticulous. She put every book back in its exact position, spine flush with the shelf edge, aligned to the millimeter. She was good, but she was not better than his memory. Dostoevsky. Tuesday. Achebe. Wednesday. A collection of Pablo Neruda's poetry on Thursday that she kept for 2 hours longer than the others, and when she returned it, the spine was slightly warmer than the surrounding volumes. She had been holding it, reading it close. He did not mention it. He did not confront her or invite her or acknowledge it in any way. Instead, on Friday morning, he left a book on the kitchen counter. Not on the shelf, on the counter, where she would see it. Where she would know it had been placed there deliberately, because books do not walk from shelves to counters on their own. It was a collection of Mary Oliver. He chose it because Mary Oliver wrote about birds and the natural world with the kind of precise, startling attention that he suspected she would recognize. He chose it because the poem on the first page was called The Summer Day, and it ended with a question. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? He chose it because he wanted her to know that someone had noticed she was alive. She took the book. She did not put it back. On Saturday, he left another. James Baldwin. This time on the small table beside the couch she never sat on when he was in the room. She took it. On Sunday, a collection of Korean folktales translated into English, because he wanted to leave a piece of himself on that table and did not know how to do it with words. She took that one too. She kept all 3 in her room, on the nightstand beside the bed, lined up with the spines facing outward. He knew because he walked past her open door one morning and saw them there, and felt something move in his chest that he did not have a name for. Something warm and sharp at the same time, like pressing your hand against a surface you did not realize was hot until the heat was already inside you. He did not push. He did not ask her to eat with him. He did not ask her name. He waited. Because Kang Seo-jun was a man who understood waiting, the way an architect understands load-bearing walls, not as passivity, but as structure. He waited because he recognized something in her stillness that he had seen in his own mirror for 24 years. The stillness of someone who had learned that the world punished visibility, and the only way to survive was to take up as little space as possible. She would come out when she was ready. He would be there when she did. It took 9 days. On the 9th day, a Tuesday, Danny came to the penthouse. He brought food, real food, not the gas station ramyun he usually arrived with, but Korean barbecue from a place in Koreatown that Sojun had been going to since he was 14, back when his father ran the syndicate and the restaurant owner paid protection money and slipped extra banchan to the skinny kid who always sat in the corner booth reading manhwa, while his father conducted business over soju and grilled pork belly. Danny set up the food on the kitchen island. The smell filled the penthouse within minutes. Garlic and sesame and gochujang and the deep caramelized sweetness of meat that had been marinated for 2 days and grilled over charcoal until the fat wept. It was the kind of smell that does not ask permission. It walks into every room. It finds every corner. It does not care if you are hiding. She appeared in the kitchen doorway 17 minutes after Danny arrived. She was wearing the same gray dress. Her feet were bare. She stood in the doorway with her hands at her sides and looked at the food the way a person looks at something they want badly and do not trust. Danny saw her first. He looked up from the counter where he was arranging plates, and his face did something that Sojun's face was not capable of doing. It softened. Completely and immediately, like ice in sunlight. "There she is," Danny said. His voice was warm. Genuinely warm, with no performance in it, no calculation, just the easy, open kindness of a man who liked people and did not see a reason to hide it. "You must be starving. Come eat. I made enough for 12 people because I have no concept of portion control. It is my greatest flaw." He grinned. "My only flaw, actually." She did not smile. But she came into the kitchen. She came slowly, the way a person approaches something they have been burned by before. She sat on a stool at the island and placed her hands flat on the marble and looked at the food. Danny put a plate in front of her without asking what she wanted. He loaded it with bulgogi and rice and kimchi and japchae, and he did it with the casual authority of someone who had been feeding people his whole life and understood that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a hungry person is not ask them to choose, but simply give them everything. She ate. She did not eat the way she had been eating for 9 days, quickly and secretly and standing up. She sat on that stool and ate slowly and carefully and tasted every bite, and her eyes closed once, briefly, on the first piece of bulgogi, and the expression that crossed her face was so unguarded, so raw, that Sojun had to look away, because it felt like seeing something he had not been invited to see. Danny talked. Danny always talked. He talked about the food, about the restaurant, about the owner's grandmother who was 93 and still made the kimchi by hand and threatened to disown anyone who suggested she stop. He talked about the weather, about a movie he had seen, about a pigeon in Flushing that he swore recognized him and followed him to the train every morning. He talked with the easy, rolling energy of a man who understood that silence could be a cage, and sometimes the kindest thing you could do for someone trapped in one was fill the air with something that was not expectation. She did not talk. She did not need to. She ate, and Danny talked, and Sojun sat at the end of the island with a cup of black coffee and watched both of them and said nothing. And then Danny said something that made her laugh. It was a small thing, a story about the pigeon, about how it had once followed him onto the 7 train and sat on the seat beside him, and a woman across the aisle had said, "Your friend needs a Metro card." And Danny had said, "He is an emotional support pigeon, ma'am. He rides free." The laugh came out of her like something escaping, short and bright and startled, and she clapped her hand over her mouth immediately, as if the sound had surprised her, as if she had not heard herself make that sound in so long that she had forgotten her body was capable of it. Danny grinned. Sojun did not grin. Sojun sat at the end of the island and watched her hand pressed against her mouth, watched the shock in her eyes at her own laughter, and something detonated quietly in the center of his chest. Not attraction, not pity, something older, something that had to do with the fact that this woman's own laugh had frightened her, that the simple human act of finding something funny had been so foreign to her experience that she reacted to it the way a person reacts to a loud noise. Who did this to you? He thought. Who made you afraid of your own joy? He did not say it. He sat with his coffee and his silence, and he let Danny fill the room with warmth, because Danny was good at that. Danny was built for it, and Sojun was built for the thing that would come after the warmth. The thing he did best. He was built for finding the people who broke things and breaking them back. After Danny left, she was still sitting at the island. The plates were empty. She was holding the cup of tea Danny had made for her. Green tea. Holding it with both hands, the way people hold things when they are not ready to let go. "Nola," she said. Sojun stopped. He had been walking toward his study. He turned. "My name," she said. She looked at him, brown eyes steady. "You never asked. It is Nola." The name landed in the room the way a stone lands in still water. Quietly, with ripples that went further than you expected. "Nola," he said. He said it once. He said it the way he said everything, with precision, with weight, as if the word was something he intended to remember. "I am Sojun." She nodded. She looked down at her tea. She looked back up. "Thank you," she said. "For the books." His expression did not change, but his hands, which had been at his sides, opened slightly. The smallest gesture, the loosening of something that had been held tight. "You are welcome," he said. He turned and walked to his study. She sat in the kitchen with her tea. The city hummed 38 floors below. The books were on her nightstand. Her name was in his mouth. Something had shifted, quietly, the way tectonic plates shift, invisible on the surface, rearranging everything beneath. The nightmares came every night. She did not scream. That was the thing that gutted him. She did not scream or cry out or thrash or do any of the things that nightmares are supposed to make people do. She made a sound, a small sound. The sound of a person trying very hard not to be heard while they were terrified. A muffled, strangled, swallowed thing that came through the wall between their rooms, like something crawling. He heard it the first night, and the second, and the third. Each time he went to her door, each time he stood there with his hand raised and his knuckles an inch from the wood, and his jaw locked so tight his teeth ached, each time he went back to his room. Because the door had a lock. He had given her the lock. He had given it to her so she could control who entered, and standing outside her door at 3 a.m, listening to her suffer, and choosing not to knock, was the hardest thing Kang Sojun had done in a decade. On the 4th night, he knocked. The sound stopped. Silence. Then footsteps, soft and careful, the steps of someone approaching a door they are not sure they want to open. The lock clicked. The door opened 3 inches, her face in the gap. Brown eyes dry, breathing controlled. Every muscle in her expression arranged into the careful architecture of a woman who was not going to admit she had been afraid. "I am fine," she said. "I know," he said. Silence. "Then why are you here?" He did not have an answer for that. Or he did, but the answer was complicated and involved the fact that the sound she made through the wall was doing something to him that he could not file under any category he recognized. It was not sympathy. Sympathy is what you feel for strangers. It was not pity. Pity looks down. Whatever this was, it looked across. It looked at her and recognized something it had seen before. "I am going to sit in the hallway," he said. "I am going to read. You can close the door." She looked at him. She looked at the book in his hand. She looked at his face, and she searched it with the thorough, skeptical attention of someone who had spent 24 years learning that kindness was always a transaction and the bill always came due. She closed the door. He sat in the hallway. He opened his book. He read. He did not hear the nightmare again that night. In the morning, he found a blanket folded neatly beside the spot where he had sat. She had slipped it under the door sometime in the night, and he had not heard her do it, which meant she moved as quietly asleep as she did awake, which meant she had been trained in silence the way other people are trained in speech. He sat in the hallway every night that week. She did not open the door again. She did not need to. He was there. That was enough. The sound through the wall grew quieter each night. On Thursday, it stopped entirely. On Friday night, the fifth night, she opened the door. She did not speak. She sat across from him in the hallway, her back against the opposite wall, her knees drawn up, her arms wrapped around them. She was wearing a t-shirt he had left for her, too big, falling off one shoulder, and her legs were bare, and her feet were bare, and she looked like the smallest person he had ever seen, folded up against a wall in a hallway of a penthouse she did not belong to. And she looked at him with those brown eyes and said nothing. He said nothing. They sat in the hallway in the dark, the city glowing through the window at the end of the corridor, and the silence between them was not empty. It was full. Full of the things neither of them was ready to say. Full of the recognition that two people who had both learned to survive by disappearing had somehow found each other in the same hallway at 3 a.m. and were choosing to be visible. I have to pause here, because this scene, this quiet, is the thing I want you to carry. Not the auction, not the money, not the power. This. Two people sitting on a floor because neither of them can sleep and neither of them wants to be alone. That is the start of something. That is the start of everything. On the sixth night, she spoke. Curtis Webb, she said. The name came out flat, factual. The tone of someone who has rehearsed a thing so many times that the emotion has been sanded off, and what remains is only data. He raised me, from 9 years old. She paused. He was paid to. Sojun set his book down. He told me my mother was dead. He told me the day I arrived. Your mama is gone, he said. I am what you got now. She pulled her knees tighter against her chest. He did not hit me. People always ask that. They want a bruise, a scar, something visible. He did not hit me. He did not yell. He did not do anything. That was the point. I lived in his house for 15 years, and I do not think he spoke 100 words to me that were not instructions. Go to school. Come back before dark. Do not touch the things in my closet. Her voice had not changed. It was still flat, still factual, still sanded smooth. But her hands, wrapped around her knees, had gone white at the knuckles. 6 months ago, she said, I found something. In his closet. The closet he told me not to touch. Envelopes. Cash. Monthly payments going back 15 years. $3,000 a month. And a photograph. She stopped. The hallway was very quiet. The city hummed far below. A photograph of a woman, she said, who looked like me, in front of a house I did not recognize, wearing a uniform, a maid's uniform. She looked at him. My mother, she said. Alive? Or alive when that picture was taken? The silence that followed was the kind that has weight, the kind that settles on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. Sojun sat in the hallway and looked at this woman and felt the pieces rearranging in his head. The auction, the bruises, the way she flinched from touch, the way she ate in secret and moved like smoke and had not cried since she was 9. What happened when you confronted him? He asked. His voice was very quiet. She looked at the wall. 3 days later, she said, He drove me to the warehouse. The temperature in the hallway changed. It was not a physical thing. It was the shift that happens when something inside a dangerous man crosses a line that cannot be uncrossed. Sojun's jaw did not tighten. His hands did not clench. His expression did not change. But the air around him became something different, heavier, colder. The kind of air that precedes events that cannot be taken back. "He found out you knew," Sojun said. She nodded. "And instead of explaining, he sold you." She nodded again. 3,000 a month, Sojun said. For 15 years. That is $540,000. Someone paid $540,000 to keep you hidden. She looked at him. Her brown eyes were steady and tired and older than 24. "I know," she said. "I have done the math." Sojun stood up. He stood the way a man stands when a decision has been made and the decision is final and the only thing left is execution. He picked up his book. He looked down at her, sitting on the floor with her arms around her knees, and her bare feet and her borrowed shirt, and her 15 years of silence. "I am going to find out who paid him," he said. "I am going to find out why. I am going to find out where that photograph was taken, and who your mother is, and whether she is alive. And when I know these things, I am going to do what I do. Do you understand?" She looked up at him. She looked up at this man who had spent $2 million to take her off a platform, who had given her a door that locked from the inside, who had sat in a hallway every night for a week because the sound of her nightmares through the wall was something he could not tolerate. And she searched his face for the lie, for the transaction, for the bill that always came due. She did not find it. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care?" He looked at her for a long time. The hallway was dark, the city glowed. His face was half lit and half shadow, and in the lit half, something moved behind his eyes that was not cold and was not controlled and was not any of the things the world saw when it looked at Kang Sojun. "Because someone made you invisible," he said. "And I know what that feels like." He turned and walked to his study. She stayed on the hallway floor. She stayed there until the sun came up and the light through the window found her face and warmed it. And she sat in the light and held her knees and thought about the word he had used. Invisible. He had said it the way a person says a word they have lived inside. The investigation began the next morning, and Kang Sojun became a different kind of man. The man she had been sitting with in hallways, the one who left books on counters and sat outside her door with a novel and did not push. That man did not disappear. He was still there. But layered over him now was something else, something mechanical and precise and relentless, like a clock that had been wound too tight and was now turning with a force that could not be stopped. He made phone calls, dozens of them, Korean mostly, but some in English, and the English ones were worse because she could understand them, and the things he said in that quiet, flat voice were not threats. Threats are warnings. These were statements of fact. "I need the financial records for Curtis Webb of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Every bank account, every transaction, every deposit going back 20 years. I need them by Thursday. Do not call me to explain why you cannot do it. Call me to confirm it is done." Danny ran logistics. He was in and out of the penthouse every day now, carrying files and laptops and the particular energy of a man who was good at his job and knew it. He set up a workspace in the dining room, transforming the long marble table into a command center of documents and screens and the organized chaos of an investigation that was moving fast. And here is the thing I need you to notice, because it matters later. Danny was good. He was thorough. He traced Curtis Webb's financial history back 2 decades. He identified the shell company making the monthly payments. He ran the shell company through 3 layers of corporate filings and found a second shell company behind it. He was efficient. He was diligent. He reported his findings to Sojun with the crisp professionalism of a man who had nothing to hide. And every single trail he followed led to a dead end, one step before the name that mattered. Remember that. Remember how helpful Danny was. Remember how hard he worked. Remember how every road he built ended just short of the destination. Meanwhile, something changed between Sojun and Nola. The hallway sits had moved. First to the living room, then to the kitchen, then to whatever room they happened to be in at 3 in the morning when neither of them could sleep. Which was every morning. Because Sojun had not slept well since he was 12 years old, and Nola had not slept well since she was 9. And the shared insomnia had become a thing they did not discuss, but relied on the way other people rely on coffee or alarm clocks. She started eating when he was in the room, not across from him at the table. Not yet, but in the same space, at the counter while he stood at the window. On the couch while he sat in the armchair. Always with distance, always with the careful architecture of someone who was learning to share air with another person and was not yet sure she could trust it. She talked. Not much. Not about the things that mattered, not yet, but about the books. About the birds she had learned to identify in Baton Rouge. About a mockingbird that used to sit on the telephone wire outside Curtis Webb's house and sing for hours, running through its stolen catalog of sounds. And she had once counted 47 different imitations in a single session and written them all down in a notebook she kept under her mattress, because keeping things visible in that house was the same as losing them. He listened. He listened the way he did everything, with total attention, with the focused intensity of a man who had been trained to notice details, because missing a detail in his world could get you killed. And when she talked about the mockingbird, something happened to his face that she had not seen before. The hard lines softened. Not much, a fraction. The way a wall softens when sunlight hits it at the right angle. Not changing the wall, just revealing that it was warmer than you thought. She noticed. She was a woman who had survived by noticing, and she filed it the way she filed everything, quietly, carefully, in the part of her mind that she did not show anyone. On a Saturday, 3 weeks after the auction, Sojun told her to get in the car. Not a command, an invitation. She sat in the passenger seat this time, not the back. Danny was not there. It was just the two of them and the city sliding past, and the silence that had become their shared language. "Where are we going?" she asked. He did not answer. He drove east, across the bridge, through Brooklyn, past neighborhoods she had never seen and streets she could not name, through a tunnel of bare November trees until the buildings fell away and the land opened up and she could smell something she had never smelled before. Salt and cold and distance, and something ancient and restless. The ocean. He parked at a beach she would later learn was called Rockaway. November. Cold. The sky the color of old steel. The beach was empty except for gulls and the wind and the sound that the ocean made, which was not a sound at all, but a conversation between water and land that had been going on for longer than anything human. She got out of the car. She walked to the edge of the water. She stood there with her sneakers, the sneakers he had bought her, getting dark at the toes from the wet sand, and she stared. The ocean went on until it ate the sky. She had read about it, she had seen pictures. She had known, factually and intellectually, that the Atlantic was vast. But knowing and seeing are different things. The way reading about fire and touching it are different things. "It just keeps going," she said. "Yes," he said. He was standing beside her, not close, 3 feet of space between them, the space they always kept, the distance that had become its own kind of intimacy, defined not by what it contained, but by what it promised. "Nobody ever told me it was this big," she said. Her voice had changed. Something had cracked open in it, something small and bright and unbearably young, and it occurred to him that this woman, who had survived things that would have destroyed people with 10 times her resources, who had endured 15 years of invisibility and 2 days of starvation and the laughter of a room full of predators without breaking, was standing at the edge of the Atlantic Ocean and experiencing wonder for the first time. She was 24 years old, and no one had ever taken her to see the ocean. The understanding of that, the full weight of it, landed on him like a physical blow. Not the auction, not the bruises, not the payments or the closet or the warehouse. This. The fact that for 24 years, not a single person had cared enough about this woman to show her the sea. His hand moved toward her. He stopped it. His fingers curled back toward his palm, and the effort of that stopping, the effort of not reaching for her when every signal in his body was screaming to close the distance, registered in his jaw, in his shoulders, in the way his breathing changed. And she heard it. She heard the breath catch. She felt the almost touch, the way you feel lightning that strikes close but does not hit you. She did not look at him. She looked at the ocean. She let the almost touch stay in the air between them, unresolved, humming, because she had felt it too, the pull, the gravity. And she was not ready for it, and he was not ready for it, and the ocean was enough for now. They stood there until her sneakers were soaked, and the wind had turned her ears numb, and the sun was a red wound on the horizon. And then they drove home in silence. And the silence was not empty, and the almost touch was still vibrating, in the 3 feet of space between them, like a note that had been struck and refused to fade. The tension broke on a Wednesday. They were in the kitchen. She was sitting at the counter reading the Baldwin, the book he had left for her 3 weeks ago, and she was pressing her finger to her lower lip the way she did when she was concentrating, a habit she did not know she had, and he had catalogued on day 4 and could not stop seeing. He was reaching past her for a glass. The cabinet was above her head. He could have asked her to move. He could have gone around. He reached past her, and his chest brushed her shoulder, and the contact lasted less than a second, but it went through both of them like voltage. She turned her head. He was still reaching. His face was right there, inches from hers, close enough that she could see the texture of the scar along his collarbone, close enough that she could feel his breath against her temple, close enough to count the shades of dark in his eyes, and there were more than she had thought. Not just brown, but layers of it. The deep brown of wood and the warm brown of earth, and something almost black at the center that was not cold at all, but hot, banked, burning slow. "You should step back," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it was not steady. "I should," he said. He did not step back. The glass was in his hand now, but his arm was still extended, still bracketing her against the counter, and he was looking at her with those eyes that were all heat and no pretense, and the mask was gone, the cold was gone, the control was gone, and what was left was just a man standing too close to a woman he had been keeping himself away from for weeks. "I am not someone you want," she said. "You do not get to decide what I want." He kissed her, or she kissed him. Later, neither of them would be able to say who moved first, because it happened the way collisions happen. Both objects in motion, both past the point of stopping. His mouth found hers, and the 3 feet of space that had been their shared boundary collapsed, and his hand came up to her jaw, and her fingers gripped the front of his shirt. And she kissed him back, with 24 years of nobody wanting her, pouring out of her chest, like water through a break in a dam. His hands were not gentle. They were desperate. They found her waist, her back, the curve of her neck, and they held on with the grip of a man who had been controlling himself so tightly for so long that the release felt like something detonating. She felt the strength in his hands, and she did not flinch. For the first time in her life, the hands on her body did not make her want to disappear. They made her want to stay. He pulled back. His breathing was wrecked. His forehead was pressed against hers, and his eyes were closed, and his hands were on her waist, and he was holding her as if she were the only solid thing in a room that was spinning. "Nola," he said. Just her name. But the way he said it, broken open in the middle, half surrender and half prayer, told her everything she needed to know about what was happening inside his chest. She put her hand on his face. She put her palm against his jaw and felt the muscle working there. The clench and release. The effort of a man who was trying to pull himself back together and failing. And she said, "Do not be sensible right now." Something broke open in his expression. Surprise. Something raw and unguarded. And then, impossibly, he laughed. Low. Quiet. The sound startled both of them, because Kang So-jun did not laugh. Danny had told her this. He does not laugh. Not ever. Not once in 22 years. He was laughing now. She had pulled it out of him the way a key pulls open a lock that has been rusted shut for decades. And the sound was warm and human, and it changed his face so completely that she felt her chest crack. He kissed her again. Slower this time. Thorough. The kiss of a man who had spent 3 weeks memorizing her and was now confirming everything he had learned. And then, the next morning, she heard something that nearly destroyed everything. She was walking past his study. The door was open 2 inches. Danny's voice. "Boss picked up a stray from the auction. Give it a month. He will get bored. He always does." She stopped. She did not move. She stood in the hallway outside the study door and heard the words land in her chest the way stones land in water, sinking through every layer of warmth the last 3 weeks had built, until they hit the cold bedrock that had been there since she was 9 years old. A stray. That was what she was. A project. A novelty. A broken thing a powerful man had picked up because fixing broken things made him feel good about himself. And when the novelty wore off, she would be invisible again, and the books on the counter would stop, and the hallway sits would stop, and the kiss that had felt like the first real thing in her entire life, would become another thing she could not keep. She did not confront him. She did not cry. She did what she had always done. She retreated. She rebuilt the wall. She became polite. She smiled at dinner and said the food was good. She said goodnight at an appropriate hour. She stopped coming to the kitchen at 3 in the morning. She stopped sitting in the hallway. She stopped meeting his eyes. She was pleasant and agreeable, and as empty as a room someone has moved out of. He noticed in 36 hours. Of course he did. He noticed everything about her, the way a man notices everything about the thing he cannot stop thinking about. He noticed that her laugh was gone. He noticed that the finger on her lower lip while reading was gone. He noticed that the warmth, the crack in the wall she had been building, the light that had started to come through, had been sealed shut so completely that it was as if the last 3 weeks had never happened. On the second evening, he set down his fork in the middle of dinner. "What changed?" he said. "Nothing changed." Something changed. You are being polite to me. Is that not a good thing? It is unbearable. She looked at her plate. He looked at her. Polite is what you were at the auction, he said. Polite is what you were with Curtis Webb. Polite is the wall you build when someone has hurt you and you do not want them to see the wound. I do not want your politeness, Nola. I want you. She set down her fork. The metal clicked against the plate, and the sound was very small in the big room. Maybe you want the idea of me, she said. Her voice was steady, her hands were not. The broken woman you rescued, the project, the stray. The word landed between them like a slap. She watched his face change. She watched the heat drain out of his eyes and be replaced by something cold and sharp and surgical. Who said that word? He said. His voice had dropped to the register she had heard him use on the phone. The register that was not a threat but a promise. It does not matter. It matters to me. Who said it? She did not answer. Her silence was answer enough. His jaw tightened, his eyes went to the study, to the direction of Danny's voice. And she saw the calculation happen in real time. The precise mechanical process of a man identifying the source of a wound and filing it for later. Then he did something she did not expect. He stood up from the table. He walked around it. And he sat on the floor. The kitchen floor. Right there, on the cold tile, beside her chair. And he looked up at her. The most powerful crime boss on the eastern seaboard was sitting on his kitchen floor, looking up at a woman in a borrowed t-shirt, and his eyes were not cooled. His eyes were not controlled. His eyes were terrified. I do not know how to do this, he said. His voice was different. Stripped. The voice beneath the voice, the one he had never let anyone hear. I have never done this. I have never wanted to do this. I have built my entire life on control, and you are the single most uncontrollable thing that has ever happened to me. She stared at him. You are not a stray, he said. You are not a project. You are not a novelty. You are the only person who has ever sat with me in the dark and made the dark feel like enough. You are the only person who has ever made me laugh. You are the only person I have ever wanted to know. And I have known a great many people, and none of them, not one, has ever made me sit on a floor. Her chin trembled. The smallest movement, the barest fracture in the wall she had spent 24 years building. But for a woman who had not cried since she was 9 years old, a trembling chin was a flood. He reached up. He took her hand. He held it the way you hold something you have been looking for your whole life and are afraid will disappear if you grip too hard. Stay, he said. Not in this apartment, not in this city. Stay with me. In the dark, in the hallway, wherever you are. I will sit on whatever floor you need me to sit on. Just stay. The wall cracked. Not all at once. A fissure. A line of light through concrete. She looked down at him on the floor. This man who terrified an entire coast, who had not laughed in 22 years until she pulled it out of him, who was sitting on cold tile because he did not know another way to show her that he was not above her, had never been above her, and she let the fissure widen. Okay, she whispered. He brought her hand to his mouth. He pressed his lips to her knuckles once, gently, the way a promise is pressed into skin. And then he stood up and pulled her to her feet and held her against his chest. And she pressed her face into the hollow of his throat and breathed him in, cedar and coffee and warmth. And the wall did not rebuild. She let it stay broken. It was the bravest thing she had ever done. She told him on a Thursday night. They were in the living room. He was reading correspondence on his laptop. She was on the couch with the Neruda, the first book he had ever left for her. The one she returned to when she needed the world to feel like it had edges she could hold. The city was dark and bright below them. The silence between them had changed. It was no longer the silence of two strangers sharing space. It was the silence of two people who had kissed in a kitchen and sat on a floor and held each other in a hallway and were now sitting 3 feet apart, pretending they could still think about anything else. "Sojun," she said. He looked up. He always looked up when she said his name, immediately, completely, as if nothing on his screen or in his syndicate or in his entire empire could compete with the sound of her voice. "There is more," she said. "More than Curtis. More than the payments. More than I have told you." He closed the laptop. He leaned forward. "Tell me." She pressed her hands flat against her thighs the way she always did when she was about to say something that cost her. She had rehearsed this. She had rehearsed it every night for a week. It did not help. "My mother," she said. Lady. That was her name. Lady Marie Coleman. She was 22 when she had me. She was a waitress at a restaurant in Midtown. She was smart and she was funny, and she braided my hair every morning, and she sang while she cooked. She paused. I remember the singing most. Otis Redding. Always Otis Redding. She sang, "These Arms of Mine," while she made breakfast, and I sat on the counter and watched her. And I was 4 years old, and I thought the whole world was that kitchen. Her voice had gone quiet. Not flat like it was in the hallway when she told him about Curtis. Something else. Something that had texture and grief, and the particular weight of a memory that a person has been carrying so long it has worn grooves into them. She was gone by the time I was 9. Curtis told me she was dead. He said it the way you tell a child the weather. "Your mama is dead." Then he put me in a bedroom and closed the door. And that was the last time my mother's name was spoken in that house. She looked at him. The photograph I found, in Curtis's closet. My mother in a maid's uniform, standing in front of a house I did not recognize. She reached into the pocket of her sweatpants and pulled out a photograph. Creased from folding, worn soft at the edges. She had been carrying it against her body since the night she found it. Tucked against her skin like a secret she was keeping alive with her own warmth. She handed it to him. He took it. He looked at it. A woman, brown-skinned, high cheekbones, wide-set eyes, wearing a gray uniform, and standing in front of a stone facade. Behind her, a garden with manicured hedges. A wrought iron gate. A driveway that curved out of frame. His face changed. She watched it happen. She had learned to read him the way she had learned to read birds, by the small movements, the micro shifts, the things other people missed. His eyes widened a fraction. His jaw shifted. The hand holding the photograph went rigid, the tendons in his wrist standing out like cables. "Where did you get this?" he said. His voice was different. Something had come unmoored inside it. Curtis's closet. This house. He turned the photograph over, turned it back. His eyes were locked on the stone facade, the hedges, the gate. His breathing had changed. She could hear it from 3 feet away. "I know this house," he said. Her heart stopped. "This house belongs to Victor Hale," he said. His voice was barely a whisper now, and the whisper was worse than any shout she had ever heard, because it was the sound of a man who was realizing something, that was rearranging everything he knew. Victor Hale. Real estate. Philanthropy. Board seats at 3 hospitals. A penthouse on the Upper East Side, and an estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. And a reputation so clean, You could see your reflection in it. He looked at her. Victor Hale has been a silent partner in my legitimate business holdings for 11 years, he said. I have dined at his table. I have shaken his hand. I have sat in that house and drank his wine and discussed investment strategy while your mother... He stopped. He set the photograph down on the coffee table with the exaggerated care of a man handling something explosive. Then he stood. He walked to the window. He placed both palms flat against the glass and dropped his head between his arms. His shoulders moved. Once, twice. So June, she said, give me a minute. His voice cracked on minute. Cracked in the middle, like something breaking under weight it was never meant to carry. She gave him more than a minute. She stood. She crossed the room. She put her hand on his back, between his shoulder blades. And she felt him shaking. The most feared man in New York was shaking under her palm. Not his jaw. Not his fists. His whole body. The tremor running through him like a current through water, invisible on the surface. Devastating underneath. She did not know why this was hitting him so hard. She did not know about his mother yet. She did not know that Kang So-jun had been 12 years old when his father told him his mother had left, had abandoned them, had walked away from her husband and her son and never looked back. She did not know that he had built his entire adult life on that wound, that every wall he constructed, every layer of control he assembled, every inch of distance he maintained between himself and the rest of the world, was load-bearing against the single foundational injury of being left by the person who was supposed to stay. She did not know that looking at a photograph of a woman imprisoned in a rich man's house, a woman erased from her child's life, a woman who did not leave but was taken, had detonated something in him that was not about Nola's mother at all. It was about his own. His shoulders stopped shaking. She felt him straighten, felt the control reassemble itself, but different now, not like a mask going on, but like a blade being drawn from a sheath. He turned. His eyes were wet. She had never seen that before. His dark eyes that gave nothing away were red-rimmed and raw and completely undefended. I will find her, he said. His voice was steady again. Steady the way a bullet is steady after it leaves the barrel. If she is alive, I will bring her home. If she is dead, I will know when and how and who is responsible. He put his hand over hers on his chest. She could feel his heartbeat. It was fast. And then, I will do what I do best. What is that? She asked. He looked at her. His wet eyes went cold. Not toward her. Toward the man in the photograph's background. Toward the house. Toward every person who had touched her mother and touched her and touched the truth and buried it. Make powerful men answer for what they have done, he said. She kissed him then. She put her hands on his face, on the skin that was still damp from tears he would never acknowledge to anyone else. And she kissed him, standing at the window 38 floors above the city. And the kiss tasted like salt and fury and the beginning of something that would not be stopped. The investigation detonated. So-jun became a machine in the weeks that followed. Precise, tireless, methodical. He made calls at 3 a.m. and sent encrypted messages at dawn and held meetings in his study that lasted 6 hours and ended with men leaving the penthouse with the particular pallor of people who have just been given instructions they are afraid to fail. Danny worked harder than anyone. He was in the penthouse before sunrise and stayed past midnight, running traces, following money, building the map of Curtis Webb's financial history with the thoroughness of a man who had something to prove. He traced the payments to a shell company called Whitfield Holdings. He traced Whitfield Holdings to a second entity called Green Acre Capital. He traced Green Acre Capital through 3 layers of corporate filings in Delaware and Wyoming, and arrived, breathless and triumphant, at a dead end. "Trail goes cold," he told Sojun. "Whoever is behind this buried it deep." Sojun looked at him. "Keep digging," he said. Danny dug. He always dug. He was thorough and diligent and efficient, and every single road he built ended just short of the name Victor Hale. But Sojun had the photograph, and Sojun had resources that Danny did not control. And while Danny built roads to dead ends, Sojun built his own road, quietly, through channels Danny did not know about, using people Danny had never met. Meanwhile, in the spaces between the investigation, something extraordinary was happening. Every morning, no matter how early Sojun started, no matter how many calls he had made or how many hours he had slept, which was never more than 3, Nola found something waiting for her. A book on marine biology, because she had mentioned the ocean and how she wanted to understand the tides. A pair of sneakers, new ones, the right size, the first shoes anyone had ever bought specifically for her feet. A sketch of a Carolina wren on a notepad left on the kitchen counter, drawn in his sharp, angular handwriting, with a note beneath it. "I looked this up. You were right. They are louder than they should be for their size. Like someone else I know." She kept the notes. She kept every single one. She pressed them into the pages of the Neruda, the first book he had left her. The one that asked what she planned to do with her one wild and precious life. She was building her answer, one note at a time. And then came the dinner, a gathering at the penthouse. Small, 8 people. Members of Sojun's inner circle, the men and women who ran the legitimate face of the Kang Syndicate. Nola had been nervous. She told him she was nervous, standing in the bedroom in a black dress that had appeared in her closet without explanation, a dress that fit her body, her actual body, not someone else's idea of it. He had looked at her and said, "You survived an auction. These people should be nervous of you." The dinner went well. Nola discovered that she was, when not actively being dehumanized, quite good at conversation. She talked to a woman about migratory bird patterns and made an older man laugh so hard he spilled soju on his tie. And then Park Jae-won arrived late. Chae-won was 29, handsome, one of Sojun's younger associates, the kind of easy confidence that came from growing up wealthy and never being told he was wrong about anything. He had sharp cheekbones and a quick smile, and the particular charm of a man who had never met a woman who did not find him interesting. He found Nola very interesting. "You must be her," he said, bowing slightly, his eyes lingering on her face with undisguised fascination. "Sojun Hyung's mystery. I have to tell you, you are not what I expected." "What did you expect?" Nola asked. "Honestly, someone harder. You have the most honest face I have ever seen. Every thought you think shows in your eyes. It is extraordinary." It was a compliment, a real one, delivered with warmth and genuine admiration, and it landed on Nola like rain on cracked earth. Because she had spent 24 years hearing that her face was forgettable, that she was the kind of woman rooms did not remember. And here was a handsome young man telling her that her face was extraordinary. She smiled, the automatic, reflexive, helpless smile of a woman who was still learning what it felt like to be seen. She should not have smiled, because the temperature in the room dropped 6 degrees in the time it took her lips to curve. She would not. The voice came from directly behind her left shoulder. She had not heard him approach. No one had heard him approach.
Kang So-jun moved through rooms the way storms move through valleys. You did not notice the change until the air was already different. Chae-won, he said. His voice was pleasant, his eyes were surgical. Would not what? Walk in the garden. The younger man had not suggested walking anywhere, but the implication was clear, and the correction was absolute. And the message was not for Jae-won at all. It was for every person in the room. His hand found the small of Nola's back. Not the careful, guided contact she was used to. This was possessive. His fingers spread wide against the fabric of her dress, and she could feel the heat of his palm, through the silk, and the heat said mine. She is not available for your observations, Sojun said. His voice had not risen, it had dropped. Find another face to admire. Preferably in another room.
Preferably in another building. Chae-won's smile died the way a candle dies in a draft, slowly, by degrees, until his face was the color of paper and his charm was a memory. Of course, young. My apologies. No offense intended. None taken, Sojun said, because none will be repeated. Am I clear? Crystal. Later. Alone. Nola turned on him. You cannot intimidate every man who speaks to me. I can, and I will. That is irrational. Something in his face changed. The cold authority fell away, and what was underneath was not controlled at all. You smiled at him. His voice was rough, raw. You never smile at anyone. That smile is mine. She stared at him. The possessiveness should have angered her. It should have reminded her of every man who had ever treated her like something to be owned. But his eyes were not the eyes of a man claiming property. They were the eyes of a man who had found the only thing in the world he was afraid of losing, and was watching someone else look at it. Nobody ever called my face extraordinary before, she said quietly. Except you. He went still. The kind of still that precedes something irreversible. Then I have not been saying it often enough, he said. He crossed the room. His hand found her jaw. He kissed her. Not gently. The kiss of a man staking a claim not on her body, but on her attention, on her smile, on the parts of her she had never given anyone because no one had ever asked. And then, 1 week later, everything collapsed. Sojun's private investigation, the one Danny did not know about, reached Victor Hale. And from Victor Hale, it reached back inside the Kang Syndicate to someone who had been feeding Hale information for 4 years. Someone who had steered the investigation away from Hale's name at every turn. Someone who called Nola little sister and made her laugh and cooked terrible ramyeon and smiled in her face every single day while protecting the network that had destroyed her family. Danny, Sojun said. They were in the study. The door was closed. Explain. Danny's face was gray. The easy warmth was gone. The charm was gone. What was left was a man standing at the edge of a cliff he had been walking toward for 4 years. He has proof, Danny said. His voice was flat, dead. Victor Hale. 6 years ago, a job went wrong. A bystander. I could not. It was an accident. He has footage. He has witnesses. He has been holding it for 4 years. Every month he tells me what he needs. Every month I give it to him. Every month I stay out of prison and another woman goes into that auction. And I tell myself it is not my fault, because I did not put them there. Sojun was very still. The terrible still. The still that comes before the thing you cannot take back. You knew, Sojun said. You knew about the auctions. You knew about Hale. You knew about her. He did not say Nola's name. He did not need to. The word her carried more weight than any name could hold. Danny could not look at him. Danny, who had looked him in the eye every day for 22 years, who had sat beside him at his father's funeral, who had been the only person Sojun trusted with a thing he never gave anyone, his loyalty, could not raise his eyes from the floor. I am sorry, Danny whispered. The silence that followed lasted 11 seconds. Nola would learn this later. 11 seconds during which the longest friendship in Sojun's life ended without a sound. Get out, Sojun said. If I see you again, I will not be this version of myself. Danny left. The front door closed. The sound was very quiet and very final. That night, she found him on the floor of his study. Not working, not reading, not making calls. Sitting in the dark with his back against the wall and his knees drawn up. And he looked, for the first time since she had known him, like a man who had run out of structure. She sat beside him. She did not speak. She put her head on his shoulder, and he put his arm around her. And they sat on the floor in the dark, and outside the window, the city went on doing what cities do. Burning and building and breaking and not caring. And they were two people on a floor because neither of them could sleep, and neither of them wanted to be alone. I keep losing people, he said. His voice was barely there. She took his hand. You have not lost me, she said. 2 days later, Victor Hale's lawyer appeared at the penthouse. He was a man in a blue suit with a briefcase, and the practiced blankness of someone who had delivered unpleasant offers before, and found the process neither difficult nor interesting. He sat at the kitchen island and placed a check on the marble counter and slid it toward Nola. The number on the check had 7 digits. Mr. Hale understands there has been some confusion, the lawyer said. He is prepared to offer a generous settlement in exchange for your discretion regarding certain family matters. This would include relocation assistance, a new identity if desired, and a commitment to no further contact. Nola looked at the check. She looked at the number. She thought about what that number could buy. An apartment. A life. A future that did not involve running or hiding, or sitting on floors at 3 in the morning, wondering if the next day would be the one that finally broke her. She slid the check back across the counter. Where is my mother? She said. The lawyer blinked. Miss, I strongly advise you to consider. I asked you a question. Where is my mother? The lawyer looked at Sojun, who was standing at the window, with his back to the room and his hands in his pockets, and the particular posture of a man who is allowing something to happen before he makes it stop. Mr. Hale's offer is final, the lawyer said. I suggest... Sojun turned from the window. I suggest, he said, and his voice was the quietest it had ever been, that you leave this apartment in the next 30 seconds, and that you tell Victor Hale that the next conversation he has about this matter will not be with a lawyer. It will be with me. And I do not make offers. The lawyer left in 12 seconds. He forgot his briefcase. No one returned it. They found her on a Tuesday. Sojun drove. Nola sat beside him. They did not speak. The highway unwound north toward Connecticut, like a gray ribbon through bare November trees, and the silence in the car was the silence of two people driving toward something that would either heal everything or break everything, and there was no way to know which until they arrived. I need to tell you something here. I need to step out of this story for a moment, because what Nola's mother endured is not fiction. It is happening right now, in houses you drive past, in buildings with manicured lawns and iron gates and names on charity boards. The International Labor Organization estimates that nearly 28 million people worldwide are trapped in forced labor. In the United States alone, hundreds of thousands of people are held in conditions of domestic servitude, trapped in private homes, stripped of identification, cut off from the outside world, hidden in plain sight, in the wealthiest neighborhoods in the country. They cook the food, they clean the floors, they raise the children of people who attend galas and write checks to charities and shake hands with senators. And no one asks their names. No one asks where they came from. No one asks if they want to leave, because asking would require seeing them, and the entire system is designed to make them invisible. Lady Marie Coleman was invisible for 12 years. In a house with 14 rooms and a staff of 6 and a wine cellar worth more than most people's homes. She existed in the basement service quarters, with no phone, no identification, no social security number, no proof that she was a person at all. The household records listed her as Sylvie, no last name. She was a line item in a budget, the same way her daughter had been a line item in Curtis Webb's closet. Mother and daughter, both erased. Both reduced to numbers on a ledger that someone else controlled. That is not a story. That is a system. And the system works because we let it. Now let me tell you what happened when Kang So-jun walked into that house. The estate in Greenwich was beautiful. That is important to say because it is important to understand. It was a stone manor on 4 acres of landscaped grounds, with a circular driveway and a fountain and hedges trimmed to geometric perfection. It looked like the cover of a magazine. It looked like the kind of place where good things happen to good people. So-jun did not knock. He walked through the front door, which was unlocked because estates like this relied on gates and cameras and the assumption that no one would dare. 3 of his men were already inside. They had arrived an hour earlier, quiet, professional, and had secured the property with the efficiency of people who had done this before. The household staff, 4 people, were sitting in the kitchen, looking confused and frightened. Victor Hale was not home. He was in Manhattan, at his office, preparing for the charity gala that was 3 days away. He did not yet know that the world he had built was 6 minutes from ending. "Where is she, So-jun?" said to the housekeeper. The housekeeper was a woman in her 50s, with careful hair and careful eyes, and the careful expression of someone who had spent years knowing something was wrong and choosing not to see it. "I do not know who you mean," she said. So-jun looked at her. He did not raise his voice, he did not threaten. He simply looked at her with those dark eyes that saw everything and forgave nothing, and he said, "You know exactly who I mean. You have known for 12 years. You have walked past her door every morning and heard her moving, and told yourself it was not your concern. I am making it your concern. Where is she?" The housekeeper's careful expression collapsed. "The basement," she said. "Service quarters. Last door on the left." Nola was already moving. She was past So-jun and through the kitchen and down the narrow staircase before anyone could stop her. Her feet hitting the steps fast and hard, her breathing ragged, her hands shaking. The basement corridor was narrow and lit by a single fluorescent strip that buzzed and flickered. The walls were painted institutional grey. The air smelled of bleach and something stale. The smell of a place where air does not circulate, because windows are not opened, because there are no windows to open. Last door on the left. Nola stopped. Her hand found the doorknob. She could not turn it. She stood there with her fingers wrapped around the metal and her whole body shaking, and the last 15 years compressed into the space between her hand and the door. Her mother was behind this door. Or the space where her mother had been. Or a room that would tell her that she was too late, that the letters had stopped for a reason, that the woman who sang Otis Redding in the kitchen and braided her hair every morning had been erased so completely that not even a door in a basement in Connecticut could bring her back. She turned the knob. The room was small. A single bed with a metal frame, a dresser with 3 drawers, a lamp with a yellowed shade, a sink in the corner. No window. The walls were the same institutional grey as the corridor, and on the wall above the bed, Taped there with careful strips of masking tape were photographs, dozens of them, cut from magazines. Children, all children. Black children with braids and gap-toothed smiles and school uniforms and birthday cakes. None of them were Nola. All of them were someone else's children, collected and curated and taped to a wall by a woman who had lost her own child and was trying to fill the hole with images of children she would never hold. And sitting on the edge of the bed, wearing a gray uniform identical to the one in the photograph, was a woman. She was thin. Her hair had gone gray at the temples, silver threads woven through the black like wires in fabric. Her hands were in her lap, and they were shaking, the fine, constant tremor of a body that has been held in tension for so long that it has forgotten how to be still. Her face was older, thinner, the cheekbones sharper, the skin pulled tight with the particular gauntness of someone who has been surviving rather than living. But her eyes, brown eyes, wide-set, deep. The exact shape and color and depth of the eyes that Nola saw every time she looked in a mirror. Lady Marie Coleman was 51 years old. She had been in this room for 12 years. She had not spoken to her daughter in 15. She had not been outside the house in 8. She had been told, when she asked about Nola, that her daughter was fine, that her daughter was taken care of, that her daughter did not want to see her. And she had not believed it, not for a single day. But believing and being able to do anything about it are different things when you are locked in a basement with no phone, no identification, and no proof you exist. She looked up when the door opened. She looked up with the automatic, defensive, practiced expression of a woman who expected to see the housekeeper, or a meal tray, or another day of the same gray walls and the same gray uniform and the same gray life. She saw Nola. The expression shattered. Every careful, defensive, practiced layer of 12 years of survival cracked and fell away, and what was underneath was raw and ancient and so purely, devastatingly human that Sojun, standing in the corridor behind Nola, had to put his hand on the wall to steady himself. Because the last time Lady Marie Coleman had seen her daughter, Nola had been 9 years old, small enough to carry, young enough to believe that her mother was coming back. And now she was 24 and tall and trembling in a basement doorway, with tears streaming down her face, and Lady Marie's hands flew to her mouth, and the sound she made was not a word. It was older than words. It was the sound a body makes when it has been holding something for 15 years, and the holding finally stops. A gasp that became a moan, that became a name. Baby. Her voice was rust and disuse, and 15 years of not saying the only word that mattered. My baby. My Nola. Mama, Nola said. And then she could not say anything else, because her mother was on her feet and crossing the room, and her arms were around her, and Nola's face was pressed against her mother's shoulder, and they were both shaking, and the sound they made together was the sound of 15 years of silence breaking apart. They held each other in that grey room with its single bed and its magazine children taped to the wall. They held each other and wept with the particular ferocity of people who had each believed the other was lost and had never stopped looking. Lady Marie's hands moved across Nola's face, her shoulders, her hair, touching her the way a blind person touches something they are trying to believe is real. She was saying her name over and over, Nola, 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 as if the repetition could make up for all the years she could not say it. You are so tall, Lady Marie whispered. You are so tall, baby. When did you get so tall? Nola could not answer. She held her mother and cried for the first time since she was 9 years old. The faucet that had been shut off for 15 years opened, and the crying was not quiet, and it was not controlled, and it was not the careful, managed grief of a woman who had learned to hide her pain. It was the crying of a child who had found her mother, and it filled the room and the corridor and the house, and it was the loudest thing Nola had ever done in her life. So-jun stood in the corridor and watched. His face was perfectly still. His jaw was locked. His hands were at his sides, and they were fists, tight, white-knuckled fists, and his dark eyes were bright with something he would not name and would not show and would not acknowledge to anyone except the woman who had taught him that tears were not weakness. His phone buzzed. He looked at it. A text from his team in Manhattan. 2 words. Hale confirmed. Victor Hale would be at his charity gala in 3 days. His daughter's engagement would be announced. The press would be there. The politicians would be there. The donors and the board members and the carefully curated audience of New York's wealthiest and most respectable would be there. So-jun looked at the text. He looked at the 2 women holding each other in the gray room. He looked at the photographs of other people's children taped to the wall above a bed where a mother had slept alone for 12 years, dreaming of a daughter she was told did not want to see her. He put the phone in his pocket. He had 3 days. It was more than enough. He brought Lady Marie home to the penthouse. He gave her the guest room with the river view, the one with the white sheets and the good light and a window that opened. She stood at the window for 20 minutes, just standing there, feeling the air on her face. And Nola stood beside her and held her hand, and they watched the river together, in silence. That night, Lady Marie told them everything. Victor Hale. She had met him when she was 22. She was waitressing at a restaurant in Midtown where he dined every Thursday. He was handsome and powerful, and married, and 41 years old. The affair lasted 4 months. When she told him she was pregnant, his face changed. Not anger. Something colder. Calculation. He offered her money to terminate the pregnancy. She refused. He offered her more money to leave the city. She refused. He stopped offering. 3 weeks after Nola was born, a man came to her apartment. He explained, politely, that Mr. Hale required the child to be placed with a guardian of his choosing. Lady Marie refused. The man explained, less politely, that Mr. Hale's resources were considerable, and that a young black woman with no money and no family and no lawyer would find it very difficult to fight a custody battle against a man who owned the judges. Lady Marie still refused. They took Nola while Lady Marie was at work. When she came home, the apartment was empty, a note on the counter, an address in Baton Rouge, Curtis Webb, $3,000 a month to raise the child quietly. Lady Marie went to the police. The police did nothing. Lady Marie went to a lawyer. The lawyer took her money and did nothing. Lady Marie tried to go to Baton Rouge. She was picked up at the bus station by 2 men who drove her back to New York and told her that the next trip would not end at her apartment. She tried 4 more times. Each time she was stopped. Each time, the consequences escalated. The last time, she was taken to the estate in Greenwich and told that she would work there, in the house, and that if she attempted to leave, Mr. Hale would ensure that Nola disappeared entirely. Not to a foster home in Baton Rouge, somewhere no one would ever find her. Lady Marie stayed. She stayed for 12 years. She cleaned the floors and cooked the meals and pressed the shirts of the man who had stolen her daughter. And she stayed because staying meant Nola was alive somewhere, and leaving meant she might not be. She looked at So-jun when she finished. I did not leave her, she said. Her voice broke on every word. I need you to know that. I did not leave my baby. They took her. He took her. And I stayed in that house because he told me if I ran, she would vanish. I stayed because Staying was the only way I could protect her, and I could not even do that. I could not even do that. Sojun's face was very still. His eyes were very bright. You did protect her, he said. She is here. She is alive. She is safe. You protected her the only way the world would let you. And now I am going to protect both of you, the only way I know how. Lady Marie looked at this man, this Korean man with dark eyes and a scar on his collarbone, and the quiet, terrifying certainty of someone who had already decided how this would end. Who are you? She asked. I am the man, Sojun said, who is going to make Victor Hale answer for every day of those 12 years. The Metropolitan Club was ablaze. Crystal chandeliers threw fractured light across a ballroom of marble and gilt. 300 guests in evening dress circulated through the space, champagne flutes catching the light, laughter polished to the appropriate sheen of people who had paid $15,000 a plate to attend Victor Hale's annual charity gala. The charity was called the Lighthouse Foundation. It provided scholarships for underprivileged children. The irony would become apparent shortly. Victor Hale stood near the main stage. He was 63 years old, silver-haired, with the tanned, preserved look of a man who spent money on his appearance the way other men spent money on cars. His suit was charcoal. His tie was burgundy. His smile was the smile of a man who had spent 40 years building an empire on the certainty that he would never be held accountable for anything. And so far, the certainty had held. His daughter, Audra Hale, stood beside him. 28. Blonde. The product of his marriage, his legitimate life. The daughter he claimed and raised and paraded through the institutions of wealth and power, with the proud precision of a man displaying his finest investment. Her engagement with state senator's son was being announced tonight. The press was there. 3 cameras, 2 reporters from society pages, 1 from the business section. The room was full of people who knew Victor Hale's name, people who served on boards with him, people who had received his donations, people who had shaken his hand at 100 galas just like this one, and never once asked how a real estate developer who had started with nothing had acquired the capital to build his empire. Because asking would have required curiosity, and curiosity, in rooms like this, was considered impolite. The doors opened at 8:17 p.m. The room did not notice at first. People were talking. Champagne was flowing. The orchestra was playing something smooth and expensive, and utterly forgettable. And then the room noticed. She was wearing gold, a gown of amber silk that caught the chandelier light and turned her skin to warm bronze. And the gown fit her body, her actual body. The shoulders, the height, the particular shape of a woman who had been invisible for 24 years and was done with invisible. Her hair was freshly shaped, her natural coils tight and perfect, and the scar through her left eyebrow was visible, and she had not covered it. She had chosen not to cover it. She wore it the way a soldier wears a medal, as proof of something survived. She was holding the arm of Kang Sojun, who was wearing a black suit that cost more than most people's cars, and an expression that cost nothing, and was worth more than everything in the room combined. His dark eyes swept the ballroom without warmth, without interest, without anything at all except the cold, absolute authority of a man who had already won and was here only to collect. Behind them, walking slowly, carefully, with the cautious steps of a woman who had spent 12 years in small rooms and was still learning to trust open spaces, was Lady Marie Coleman. She wore a dress of deep blue. Her gray threaded hair was pulled back. Her brown eyes, Nola's eyes, were sharp and clear and terrified and brave. Victor Hale saw them from across the ballroom. The champagne glass stopped halfway to his mouth. His face did not change all at once. It changed in stages, like a building coming down. First the smile froze. Then the color drained from his skin, starting at the jaw and moving upward until his entire face was the grey-white of old plaster. Then his hand began to shake, a fine tremor that rattled the champagne against the crystal, and the sound was tiny and bright and completely swallowed by the room's sudden, devastating silence. Because the room had seen her. The room had seen Lady Marie Coleman, whom no one in this room had ever met, walking behind the most powerful crime figure on the eastern seaboard and his companion. And the room did not yet understand, but the room could feel it. The way you feel a storm before the rain. The way you feel a crack in the ground before the earthquake reaches you. Seo-jun walked his companion to the center of the ballroom. He stopped. He did not raise his voice. He had never raised his voice. The room went quiet the way rooms go quiet when a dangerous man decides to speak. Not because he demanded silence, but because the alternative to listening was something no one in the room wanted to experience. "Good evening," he said. His voice carried the way a blade carries, not by force, but by precision. Many of you know me by name. Some of you know me by reputation. Very few of you have met me, because I do not attend events like this. I am here tonight for one reason, and when I am finished, you will understand why. Victor Hale set down his champagne glass. His hand was still shaking. His daughter looked at him with confusion. The press looked at Seo-jun with fascination. The room looked at everything with the breathless, rubbernecking attention of people who can feel that something unprecedented is about to happen. 12 years ago, Seo-jun said, a woman was taken from her home and imprisoned in a house in Greenwich, Connecticut. She was stripped of her identification. She was given a false name. She was held in a basement service quarters with no phone, no contact with the outside world, and no legal proof that she existed. She cooked and cleaned and served the man who imprisoned her, and she did this for 12 years, because he told her that if she tried to leave, her daughter would disappear. The silence in the ballroom was total. 300 people holding 300 breaths. 15 years ago, that same man took a 9-month-old child from her mother and placed her with a paid guardian in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He paid $3,000 a month, $540,000 over 15 years, to keep the child hidden and silent. When the child grew up and discovered the truth, the guardian sold her to an underground human auction rather than let her ask questions. A woman in the front row gasped. The cameras were rolling. Victor Hale had not moved. The man who did this, Seo-jun said, is standing in this room. He is wearing a charcoal suit and a burgundy tie. He has donated to your hospitals and sat on your boards and shaken your hands at 100 galas, just like this one. His name is Victor Hale. The room detonated, not with sound, with silence that broke into whispers, that broke into exclamations, that broke into the particular chaos of 300 people simultaneously realizing that the man they had been celebrating was a monster. Hale moved. He pushed away from the stage. He took 2 steps toward the exit. He took a third. "Mr. Hale," Seo-jun said. His voice had not changed. Still quiet, still precise. Still the voice of a man who did not need to chase because the exits were already covered. "I would not." 2 men in dark suits appeared at the ballroom doors. Behind them, visible through the glass, the red and blue pulse of police lights. Detectives from the FBI's Human Trafficking Task Force are waiting outside, Sojun said. They have a warrant. They have sworn testimony from 5 members of your household staff. They have financial records tracing payments to Curtis Webb. They have your own records from the Greenwich estate showing a domestic worker listed as Sylvie with no social security number for 12 consecutive years. And they have this woman. He stepped aside. Lady Marie Coleman stepped forward. She was shaking, her hands, her shoulders, her whole body trembling with the particular fear of a woman who had been invisible for 12 years and was about to become the most visible person in the room. But her chin was lifted, her spine was straight, her brown eyes found Victor Hale across the ballroom and held. She did not speak. She did not need to. Her presence was the testimony. Her face was the evidence. Her body in that room, alive and standing and refusing to disappear, was the thing that Victor Hale had spent 15 years and $540,000 trying to prevent. Hale looked at her. His face was gray. His mouth opened. No sound came out. He looked at his daughter, Audra, who was staring at Lady Marie with an expression that was slowly, horribly rearranging itself into understanding. "Dad," Audra whispered. "Who is she?" Hale could not answer. His mouth was still open, but the words were gone. Every word he had used for 40 years, every lie, every carefully constructed narrative about who he was and what he had built, all of it had evaporated in the space between his mouth and the air. The detectives entered the ballroom. 2 of them. Professional. Calm. They walked across the marble floor, and the sound of their shoes was the only sound in the room. "Victor Hale," the lead detective said, "you are under arrest." Hale did not resist. He did not run. He stood between the detectives and let them turn him, and let them put his hands behind his back, and let them close the metal around his wrists. And the click of the handcuffs was small and bright and final, like the period at the end of a sentence that had been running for 15 years. They walked him through the ballroom, past the champagne, past the chandeliers, past the orchestra, which had stopped playing, past 300 people who watched in silence as the man whose name was on the building was led away in handcuffs by federal agents. Nola watched him go. She watched the man who had stolen her mother, who had erased her from her own life, who had paid to keep her hidden and silent and invisible for 24 years, stumble between 2 officers, with his silver hair falling across his forehead and his reputation crumbling around him like a building he had forgotten to inspect. She felt Sojun's hand tighten around hers. "How do you feel?" he asked. His voice was quiet, just for her. Nola thought about it. She thought about the auction, the gray dress, the bare feet, the laughter. She thought about Curtis Webb's house and the bedroom that had never been painted, and the 15 years of silence. She thought about her mother in the basement, taping pictures of other people's children to the wall because her own child had been stolen. She thought about the hallway at 3 a.m, and the books on the counter, and the sound of Sojun's laugh in the kitchen, and the ocean that went on until it ate the sky. "I feel," Nola said, and she paused, and the pause contained 24 years of searching for a word that fit. "Like myself." Sojun looked at her. His dark eyes were warm. There was no coldness in them, no mask, no control. Just him. Just the man she had found behind the blade. The man who sat on floors and left books on counters, and cried at a window, and held her in hallways, and told her she was not invisible. "You have always been yourself," he said. "The world just caught up." They left the gala. They did not stay for the aftermath, for the press, for the questions, for the social earthquake that would ripple through New York society for months. They left because none of that was for them. The justice had been delivered. The truth had been made visible. The rest was noise. He drove her to the ocean. Same beach, Rockaway. November again. Cold. The sky was black and the stars were out, and the ocean was dark and vast and roaring the way it always roared, indifferent to everything human, running the same conversation with the shore that it had been running since before any of this mattered. She got out of the car. She walked to the edge of the water. She stood there with her gold dress whipping in the wind and her sneakers getting dark at the toes and the salt air burning her lungs, and she felt the cold and the dark and the bigness of it. He stood beside her, not 3 feet away, beside her, shoulder to shoulder. The distance they had kept for weeks, the careful space that had been its own kind of intimacy, was gone. He was right there. "It is still going," she said. "It always will." "Nobody ever told me it was this big." He turned to her. He put his hand on her face. His palm was warm against her cold cheek, and his thumb traced the scar through her eyebrow, the one nobody had ever taken her to get stitches for. And he looked at her with those dark eyes that had seen her when the entire world had looked away. "Now you can see it whenever you want," he said. She kissed him. Standing at the edge of the Atlantic, with the wind pulling at her dress and the waves crashing, and her mother alive and safe in a penthouse in Manhattan, and the man who had erased them both in handcuffs, and the night so dark and so wide that it felt like the whole world had opened up, and there was finally, room for her in it. She kissed him, and he kissed her back, and his arms came around her and pulled her against him. And the ocean kept going, and the stars kept burning, and the tide came in, and the tide went out, and neither of them moved. Somewhere in the city, a woman was standing at a window, looking at the river, breathing free air for the first time in 12 years. Somewhere in the city, a man in handcuffs was learning that the women he had erased were not erasable. Somewhere in the city, the story that had started on an auction platform in a warehouse in Queens with 3 words, "I will take her," was ending the way the best stories end. Not with a bang, not with a speech. With 2 people standing at the edge of the water, holding each other, choosing to be visible. And the ocean kept going. If this story made you feel something, I want to hear about it. Tell me in the comments. What moment hit you the hardest? What part made you hold your breath? This community, you, every single one of you listening right now, you are the reason these stories exist. Subscribe and turn on notifications not to miss our next story. Share your thoughts in the comments and inspire others. Take care of yourselves, and remember, the right person will never need you to wear a veil. They will find you barefoot on a platform and see what the whole room missed. Until next time.